So this is part 2 of the normalization video, and you've rejoined at the second rule of normalization. So the second rule is deciding what your table will contain data about. So let's just remind ourselves that a record is all the data about a person or a thing, and a table is a collection of records about the same thing. So for example, in our example that we just had, all of this stuff is data that's flying around there, but we've recognized that there is data about a customer and there's data about the visit to the shop, and they're different things. So what we're going to do, by creating a primary key field that is the customer ID in that table that we had in the video in part 1, what we're doing is we're saying that that table is going to contain data about the customer. And so then we're going to remove all the other data to another table. So let's have a look at what those look like. Yeah, and what we're going to do is show how those can be linked together still, because remember, in the beginning of this whole thing, all of that stuff was in the same flat file database, so they have something to do with each other, which is what we know, because obviously that customer is going into the shop and he's buying those things. So let's have a look what those might look like when we have two related tables. So here's one table, and here's the other table. So look what we've done. We've added in this primary key field, and that's because we've decided that it's going to be called the customer ID. That means that this is customer data. And then these things, the quantity, the items, and all that stuff, that doesn't have anything to do with the customer, except it's kind of related. Yeah, what that has to do with, it has to do with purchases. So we've made a purchase ID and we put that table in there. But in order to preserve the relationship, what we've done is we've kept that link by keeping that customer ID and bringing it into that new table. Now what we've done there is we've created something called a foreign key field. So the customer ID in here is not the primary key field of that table. The primary key field is the purchase ID. That exists in there so that with each purchase we can include a customer ID. So if Homer's customer ID was 1, then that's just going to appear the same 1, 1, 1 in every single record for all of those purchases. So that's the second rule of normalization. Remember what it was? It was that you need to decide what table will contain data about. Yeah, so this is a table that's going to have data about the customers. Everything that's not to do with the customer goes into another table, a new table, and you create a foreign key field so that it remains linked. Now, let's have a look at the third rule. Okay, third rule is that we have to check for repeating data. Okay, we do this by repeating the other rules again. Yeah, so let's have a look at what our table purchases will look like. Let me just repeat that again so that it's really stressed. What we're doing is we're going to repeat those same steps again. So basically that's the process. Yeah? Have a look at it, decide, add a primary key field, decide what the table is about, move everything else into another table, add a foreign key field, decide what that table is about, and so on and so on. Yeah? So what you're going to do is, let's just have a look at what that purchases table would look like in this same example. Okay, the purchase ID is just a random number, it doesn't matter what it is. The customer ID is the customer's data. So in this example, customer 1, well that's Homer. Yeah, that's Homer Simpson. So he's bought 3 different things. Yeah. And so we can see him buying these 2 packets of cupcakes and these 5 glues and this hammer, and all on the same date. Okay, so what we have to do is we have to ask ourselves, do we have any repeated data? And if you look over here, yes, there's a bunch of repeated data. We're entering in the stock item every time somebody buys something. Okay, so that's a problem here. This is repeated data. So that's going to tell us that we actually need to remove some data to another table, because this is not data just about the purchases. It's clearly data about the purchases and data about the stock, right? So it's more than one thing. So let's have a look at what that looks like. Okay, data about the customer. We sorted that out already. Now, what's happening here? We've got data about the purchases, right? But actually, it's not just one thing. It's actually data about the purchase and data about the stock. Okay, so what we've done by looking for that repeated data is like our sort of symptom of a problem. That's how you think about it. By looking for repeated data, we can identify that a table doesn't contain data about one thing. It contains it about more than one thing. Okay, so we looked through there, we found repeating data about stock, and we realized that table has got data about stock in it as well. Okay, so now we follow the same old rules, we move them to another table. Okay, so what we've now got is we've got data about the purchases and data about the stock. Okay, so we've got three different tables now. Look what we did when we moved the data about stock into another table. Yeah, we left a stock ID as a foreign key field in that original purchase data table. And I've just put in some other bits of data like the model number, the make, this number in stock, just to show you that we can add in a whole bunch more data about those items if we want, because this is very clearly just data about stock. Okay, so that's what the tables look like now. Okay, we've got the relationship here, one to many, and we've got a relationship here, one to many. One meaning that stock ID only ever appears once in that table. There will never be another stock ID number 5 or something, but it can appear many times in here, which makes sense, right? Because an item can be purchased as many times as we want. Okay, so our tables are starting to look more normalized. Let's have a look at some useful terms here. Remember primary keys, remember foreign keys, remember relationships, and those kinds of relationships, one to many relationships, and this whole process, obviously, is a process of normalization. Okay, so the steps that we've got to go through when we're normalizing a set of fields is, first we make sure that all the records are unique. We do that by adding a primary key field. Yeah. Then we decide what a table contains data about, usually has something to do with the primary key field, like customer ID is a table of customers. Move everything to another table. Then we check for repeating data. That's the symptom that we haven't quite finished yet. If we haven't finished yet, we repeat steps 1, 2, and 3. And we keep doing that until we end up with, well, we can't go any further. So, my last thing was that you need to repeat this until you can't go any further. So here's the first question. You're going to talk about this in your groups when you get together as a group. So the first question is going to be, can we go any further with this table? So if you've got to this point, do some thinking, bring those thoughts with you to your group so you can start to bash these ideas around between you. There is a part 3 of this video. You don't need to watch it just yet. You need to have a look at that practical problem first.